So we'll go ahead and get started with the City Council Community Planning and Transportation Committee meeting for Thursday, April 25th, 2025. We have 3 items on the agenda today, and the first one is our usual presentation of the Public Transit Ridership Report. This one would be for March, and we have Taylor here to go over that with us.
Chair and Council. Attached, as always, you have the memo with some details on it, as well as the ridership reports for Embark, as well as Norman on Demand. On the memo itself, we should have on the fleet replacements the 6 CNG cutaways that we've received maybe off this memo next month. Hopefully they'll be in the fleet and ready to go. We've just been working through having them get onboarded, make sure they're all equipped and there's no outstanding warranties with the manufacturer that we have to do. And then on the back of the memo, there's the Central Oklahoma Long Range Transit Plan. We came to council on January 14th with ACOG and Embark staff to give an update on that, and they'll be coming back to full council on May 13th to give another update on that, on the development of that plan. So, and then finally for microtransit on the memo, we have the attached service report, but I do want to point out that we've been having some back and forth on the budget constraints, and I'm happy to go into that in more details after maybe the ridership numbers if you guys would like to. So moving to the ridership though, for Embark, you may notice that some of the paragraphs and wording is italicized. That's because March was the first month that the new software for Embark was implemented on paratransit on Embark Plus, and they just want to fine tune those numbers, make sure they're correct before publicizing them. So next month you should have updated numbers on the paratransit side for April, but the year-to-date numbers will include March as well. But I do want to point out for fixed routes, we had another great month, rebounding back from February, where it was a little bit closer to last February. And we had 43,178 rides on fixed route compared to 31,961 on March of the last year. So seeing another large increase on the fixed route side. Our ridership per service hour for the weekday fixed route was up to 21, which was about a 15% increase above last March. So, and that was with OU being on spring break too, which is nice to see that the ridership is still relatively high without a week's worth of maybe students getting around as much. And then for Norman on Demand ridership for March, we had just over 3,800 rides, and last March we had about 2,662 rides, so about a 30% increase for that program as well year over year or month to month. So with that, I'll take any questions on the memo or the report or anything else you guys have.
So a 25% increase in total ridership this fiscal year compared to last fiscal year. Is that right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. It's pretty very good. I'd say 26%, really 25.9. And then that number definitely caught my attention. The fixed route service total for March, I mean, being 12,000 more this March compared to March of last year. Is there anything we could think of that would be the reason for that?
Well, this was still just a few months in of our route changes,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm still hoping we're kind of riding that wave of people were getting adjusted to the new routes, and now a year in, still a little over a year in, they've adjusted. They're taking more trips. Maybe it's a bit more user friendly for other people to come on board and use the transit system. That's always the goal, is to bring in some of those choice riders that maybe have other means of transportation. So I don't know if we have any other insight into that. We did have or through Embark, they did their customer satisfaction survey last year, and we've been looking over the results, hoping to bring that to council like we've done in the past. There might be some insight in that report, but I don't know if we have any other insights of why ridership in Norman would be continuing to gain, other than I'm still hoping that it's because of the route changes for the most part, people just finding it more user friendly.
Because I did notice too that wheelchairs was a little bit down by a little over 100, but then passengers with bikes or other mobility devices more than doubled this March compared to last March. So that was interesting too. Councilor Pica?
That's actually exactly what I was gonna say. I wondered if the bicycle increase was related to just the ridership increase, but that was only 35%, and the bikes are 52%. So
Yeah.
is there anything that we're thinking might be leading or driving that increase?
Bikes specifically, and sometimes with mobility devices, the weather really plays a large part into it.
I guess I have to go back and see what
It
March
just-
of last year looked like.
Yeah,
You know,
it can really be really cyclical.
Just didn't know if there was anything that was happening that we could intentionally
I wish I
turn up or
could.
down. You
Yeah,
know,
I wish I could point to something, but
Absolutely.
I'm glad that it's an option there though, because it really does increase the reach of transit when you can bring your bike on and off.
Absolutely.
Mobility devices.
With the Plus, Embark Plus, is there a way we'd be able to see, since we service the entire 200 square miles of Norman, are there areas where it's never being requested, or I don't know, and if it's not being requested, is it costing us anything for us to allow it to go the entire city limits, even if it's not ever going out there?
Yeah,
Or
because
it's wherever.
because it is demand response, if there's no demand, say to the east side of the lake or northeast side, southeast side, wherever, North Norman, then we're not gonna go out there if there's not a person that's been, an eligible person that's been put in the system that's requesting a ride. So, we could certainly look at how many rides we're providing in zone 2 specifically and say, that zone is maybe costing us maybe this much or something, but hypothetically, if there's no demand, we're not having a cost to that.
So the Plus, it's not this is how much it costs to cover 200 square miles. This is how much it would cost to cover 100 square miles. It's not set up like that, or is it?
Not necessarily. I mean, we know from historical data how much it costs year to year to provide that service just because we have the clientele and about the number of trips, but it could fluctuate year to year drastically if you think about it. If there's a few individuals that move in, get certified, ask for a bunch of trips, or vice versa, people move out of Norman, they don't need the service anymore, right? So because it is that demand-based service, it could fluctuate a little bit year to year. Again, we could look at like zone 1 and say, this is how much it costs to provide the federally required service.
Yeah.
And then everything outside of that is kind of extra that the city's providing, but
Yeah, and just thinking about budgets and costs, if it would be any savings, if we identified areas where it's never going to, but it still cost us to cover that area.
yeah, we just won't go out there if there's no demand. So I think we'd have to look at current rides that have been given in the last year or so and say, draw a line and yeah, we'll save
Heat
this
map
much
or
money
something. Okay,
if we don't provide those rides, right?
Councilmember Grant?
I was looking at the strategic performance measures and looking at the year-to-date versus the targets. Is FYE 25, is that like cut off in July?
Yeah, it's our fiscal year, yeah,
Okay.
July 1 through June 30th.
I was just thinking about how very close here we are in April to some of these targets.
For Embark specifically or Norman on demand?
Just like the number of Norman fixed route passenger trips provided, year to date it's 312,000. Target is 400,000. Number of Norman paratransit trips provided, 16,600-ish. Looking for 23,800-ish as a target. Yeah, just looking at those and wondering, it stops in July. So what happens if it doesn't hit its target? Do you adjust for the next fiscal year?
Yeah, so we're through the budget process, we're looking at those numbers now for 26. So technically, we won't have the final results from 25 for the 26 year. But we try to forecast it out and say this is what we'd like 26 to be. Just like all of our performance measures that we have in the budget for any division that you see.
So the one that caught my eye was percentage of Norman required paratransit pickups denied due to capacity. It said 0.85% and the target for this year was like 0%.
Yeah, and the target is always gonna be 0% because we're required to provide 100% of the trips in zone 1. for those eligible persons. The reality is sometimes we're not gonna hit that mark, and that's why we wanna keep an eye on that and make sure that it's as low as possible.
So under
The federal regulation says, or basically says that you provide those trips, even if you don't have the manpower or the vehicles, go find the manpower and vehicles to provide them, so. 1% or less is great, but 0 has to be the target.
Okay, so does that just like inform you about paratransit and, I mean, like, do you know what 0.85% of that it's about, or just like peak hours and you don't have anything?
Yeah, it's probably gonna be peak hours that we're not able to meet that trip request specifically, and we may not even be able to provide a alternative in that we have an hour before and an hour after of the requested time to be able to negotiate with the passenger. And so if we can't meet that need, then that's a capacity denial.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is this also the part where we get to talk about Norman on demand?
If you guys would like, yeah. That's fine.
So we had discussed maybe upping the fee or reducing coverage. What's the current status of alterations we could make so that we could potentially keep it on?
Yeah. And before I get into those, I'd like to go back a little bit. So we've been able to, as staff, find some decreases in the City of Norman side of the budget for things on the fleet side and the admin side. We've been able to whittle away on that on some things that are nice to haves, but maybe not what we needed with the current budget coming up that's forecasted. So we've been able to cut back on some expenses on the City of Norman admin and fleet side. And then we've also found some money that was about $48,000 that was accidentally double counted with our security 5 months that we had at end of January. We submitted a budget for Embark about the same time, so it kind of got lost in the shuffle. So with all that, we've kind of been whittling down to try to present the best case scenario to you all on that service and be able to maybe accommodate keeping it, or at least decreasing the amount that's would need to be cut to keep it, if that's what council wanted to do. I think as you learned last Tuesday, it's not in the budget currently, so that would be a council decision and amendment that would need to be proposed and approved if you guys wanted to appropriate that expense. We have looked at alternatives. You mentioned the fare increase. I'm supposed to hear back from VIA next week on some fare scenarios on increasing that, as we've talked about. Don't think that's gonna really make up a large part of the budget, but it could help, and it might help with demand too. So it might create a higher quality of service because the demand may go down a little bit. People may prioritize their trips a little bit more, and more people would get those trips that at the times that they want, right?
And then there was also reducing overlap with the fixed route
Yeah.
times.
So that was one thing we asked VIA to do too, is analyze, are there any less productive hours or times that they would propose that we maybe trim the service a little bit? They looked and proposed maybe the last hour of each service day. So as the night goes on, the day goes on, ridership kind of dwindles down. We obviously want to try to avoid any reduction in service, but that's what they propose. Now, that's not speaking to what you're talking about, Councilmember Grant, where we have that overlap Monday through Friday, 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. I think if we can, I'd love to analyze that a bit more to make sure what we want to do there. But if we did that, that may be a 4 to 7% reduction in the cost. OU is not too keen on the 2 to 3 a.m. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, because that's a part of their Safe Ride program historically. And with that, OU has offered to increase their contribution by about $6,000, so it'd be $127,000 instead of the $121 roughly than what has been in the past. And then I think the biggest thing we've been able to think about is our current contract runs August 20th through next August 20th roughly. And just to help us through this next year, maybe we could have a 10-month-ish contract end of the next fiscal year and shave off that amount just to get us through this next year. And then obviously next year we might have to go through the same thing. We'd obviously have a 12-month that we'd have to discuss. But that VIA got back to me today actually about that, which was great, and we'd be able to save approximately $95,000 off the budget for next year if we did that, which again, may be just enough to get us to limp through. So I've run some scenarios. I think if we did the 10-month contract along with the budget that's in the budget book currently and those other items that we talked about, I think we may be at just over 80,000 in the black for transit. Again, that's a lot of whittling down that we had to do the last few months and have come up with some innovative ideas like the 10-month contract. But I do want to point out that's about 1% of transit's budget, maybe a little bit more than 1%. So any fluctuation in the sales tax or anything that comes up, it's going to be a tight budget either way. But it's looking like we would be at least on the right side of things there. And then if council wanted to see any further reduction in service outside of that, we could definitely look into that, and that would just be extra funds that we could count on in the budget. But as of right now, it's looking like it would be tight, but we would be okay.
Okay. So what I understand from that is we would not likely need a general fund subsidy to continue the on-demand under the scenario you've presented.
Likely. Yeah.
But you'd have a 1% cushion basically.
Yeah. If we needed some buses, local match, or I know it's going to be a tight budget for everything, and we obviously wouldn't try to propose those things for next year anyways, but if something came up at the transit center, any additional expenses would be pretty tight, so.
And that might be a mid-year
Maybe.
adjustment to that. So
Maybe, yeah.
I think that was what we're trying to clarify was, is there transit funds from the transit tax to cover our current transit services? And it sounds like yes, on a pretty razor thin cushion though.
Yeah. Something to think about, yeah.
Well, and I think we want to keep it going if we can. I mean, there's 30% increase in ridership, 55% increase in wheelchair accessible vehicle requests. That's the way I'm reading that.
Mm-hmm.
So looks like we're starting to see it take off more, and that was one of the primary reasons why we started the program anyway. So yeah, I guess if you have more information for us next month from Via and
Yeah, it's confusing because of the scooter company.
yeah, and then we might be able to make a more sound decision. But I think I would like to towards the path of continuing the service as we have it.
Okay, well, maybe as we refine it more, we can come back next month and talk about it again. And
Especially if it isn't going to need general fund help, then I think that's what we should do. So
okay.
and then we've talked about it many times before, but maybe an update next month or in June, but if we were to institute fares on the fixed route system, how much would it cost to do it, and how much would it generate? It's been, I don't know, a year or so, or maybe more since we last had that discussion, but Dan Munson keeps asking about it, and he asked about it in the budget hearing Tuesday night, so figure we can get a update for anybody that isn't familiar with that discussion that we've had before about why we aren't doing fare and how much it costs to do it and what it would generate, so that would be helpful.
Yeah, I can do my best. The last few times we've done that, it's been some consultant hours working on that. There's ridership, elasticities that go into that and different things. But I think we could come up with a rough idea and at least get an idea for you all.
And maybe pull out the last.
Yeah,
one we
just
had
refresh
and
it.
yeah,
Mhm.
and then
we can do that.
go over that for everybody's, for the public's consumption and our own. Okay, any other comments from council on public transit stuff? Okay, we did have a few members of the public that did request if they could give a few pieces of feedback or comment about public transit, and if none of you object to that. Would you like to, Chris?
Sure, thank you,
And if
Stephen.
you would introduce yourself.
Definitely. I'm Chris Nanny. I've been a paratransit user for 28 years. I served as the chair of the CART Advisory Committee for 10 years. So, and between all of us here tonight, we're all paratransit users or supporters, and between all of us, we have 100 years of experience on paratransit. So we hope that you'll listen to us tonight, because in the last 2 months, we've been experiencing a lot of difficulties using the service. And there's some very concerning things. I don't know if all of you know, but 2 months ago, Embark instituted a new software scheduling program for paratransit, and it has wreaked havoc for us. There's all kinds of scheduling problems, hours on the phone, multiple phone calls, calls not returned, missed messages, missed rides, dropped rides, pickups way outside of our pickup window, all kinds of problems that way. Communication with Embark has been difficult. Many of us have made multiple calls to customer service, but we've seen very little change, actual change. I myself have made at least 7 calls to customer service in the last month, or emails. I've called Dr. Dillon. My call was not returned. So you can imagine, frustrations are really high, really high. And so much so that wellness center staff have been on the receiving end of a lot of these concerns, frustrations, comments. We've had 3 meetings of paratransit riders at the wellness center to discuss our concerns, and that's why we decided to come tonight with a group and bring these concerns to you, because we want you to be aware. We know that the Embark contract is up for renewal, and we want you to be aware of what we're experiencing so that maybe you can negotiate changes, because we feel changes need to be made. So our 2 biggest areas of concern are passenger safety and ADA violations. I don't know if you're aware, but many of our paratransit riders, especially full circle passengers, are traveling up to 3 hours. 3 hours on paratransit to get to where they need to go. Many of them live east of Lake Thunderbird, and they're traveling all the way to the northwest corner of Norman to go to Full Circle. Most of them go every day, and many of them are traveling for 3 hours. At least over an hour. I personally have had 4 rides in the last month where I'm on the bus over an hour. And you can imagine, here you are in a wheelchair, you're stuck on the bus. It's not like you're on a fixed route where you can just hop off and go to the restroom. So I've been stuck on the bus an hour and 10 minutes, an hour and 20 minutes, 40 minutes, up to 2 hours to get where I need to go. So I can't imagine these Full Circle folks traveling up to 3 hours. And we've talked to the social worker at Full Circle, and she says this is happening over and over. And she, she didn't know what was going on. She didn't know about the software change. So the software system, we're being told, is taking precedence over safety and service, and we can see that in the drivers. The drivers are stressed out. Our very friendly, helpful, kind drivers are totally stressed out because we can see them. We've learned that they no longer get a paper manifest of their trips for the whole day, so that a lot of them would go home, and we know all of them personally. We've been riding for years. We know these drivers personally. They know us. They know our locations. They know our patterns of traveling. They know, our needs. And they are so stressed because the computers are generating errors in addresses, sending them way off on goose chases because of wrong addresses. I don't know if the computer's just generating, random addresses or something. I don't know. But errors in scheduling, time delays. And one of the biggest problems is the computer wants to fill in any openings that it shows on the schedule. So the drivers get about an hour, time stamp of who they're supposed to pick up. But then as they're traveling across town, the computer's interjecting rides as they go across town. So as we understand it, that's one reason why people are traveling so long. Because they pick up someone, and then by the time they get that person across, they've gotten multiple rides interjected all along the way. Pick up, drop off, all the way across town. And so this is causing all kinds of delays. It's causing people to have to go to work early and sit in parking lots before businesses open. People go to medical appointments and sit in the parking lot. And it's fine on a nice sunny day, but think about it in bad weather. You're sitting out there, you're sitting in the middle of a parking lot by yourself in the rain, the wind, the cold. And we're expected to be out on our driveways in this 30-minute window, which, okay, that sounds fine. But, if we have to go back in to go to the restroom, sometimes we come out and we miss the bus. And the problem is that the ride times we're getting are not matching the ride times the drivers are getting. And it can be sometimes up to 15 or 20 minutes different. And it's because the computer is constantly changing the times. And we can hear it when we're on the bus. The drivers' tablets are constantly dinging every time there's a change. So it's just ding, ding, ding all the way across town. And so now we're learning when we get on the bus, we ask them, well, what time did you get? And it's often 15 or 20 minutes different than the time we were notified to be out there. And oftentimes the time is way disparate from the 30-minute window. So they're picking up us, up to 15, 20 minutes before the window, or 15, 20 minutes after the window. Or we're being forced out of essential medical appointments 20 minutes early. People are missing dialysis. They're having to cut their dialysis appointments 20 minutes short because the computer decided, oh, we need you to leave at 4:15 instead of 4:35. I've had that happen. I was in an essential medical appointment right in the middle of it, and they said to me, well, the computer says you have to leave at 4. I said, well, I can't leave. I requested 4:30. Well, I tried it. I entered it. The scheduler said, I entered it in the computer, and you have to leave at 4, or we can't get you home. So passengers are telling me they're getting stranded places, they're being left, they're being told we can't accommodate you. So, I thought it was interesting that you're saying about 1%, as I understand what you said, 1% are being turned away because of lack of capacity. We wonder if it's even higher than that. And we wonder if people have stopped calling because they're so frustrated that they can't get rides. In fact, we've been told that by Wellness Center members, that they have just stopped calling Embark Plus because they can't get rides. And we're being told we have a very narrow scheduling window. So, they're telling us you have to call on Wednesday to schedule rides for the following Wednesday. Oftentimes when we call on Wednesday, those slots are already full. So, what's the percentage that is required to provide for us versus the number of passengers that are approved for the service? We're beginning to wonder, what is the percentage of rides that they're actually providing according to how many of us are using the service? And how many passengers have we lost just because they got frustrated not being able to schedule rides and they stopped calling? So, the numbers you're being told don't really reflect those kinds of things. And they don't reflect our frustrations. And they don't reflect the attitudes that we're being subjected to. During this whole process, this whole 2-month process of trying to get used to this system, and believe me, we're trying. We're adaptive people. We have to be. We've used this service for, like I say, 100 collective years. We've had to adapt over and over and over to changes. And we're trying. We're trying our best to meet these demands, but my gosh, we're stressed out. There's daily anxiety. Lots of us, we don't ever get our notifications of when the ride is coming. Or we get it, 10 minutes, so we have to rush out there. And then we're getting into confrontations with drivers because they're stressed out and they're being told, on-time performance is the most important thing. So, you know, we're getting on the bus and the driver's already telling us, well, you're 15 minutes late, even though we came out right when we were told to come out. I've had that happen over and over. Well, you're 15 minutes late. You're 6 minutes late. You're already a no-show. You know, hurry up, get on the bus. I've got to meet my time schedule. I've been told that so many times, and I think a lot of us have too. And it's, you know, and we're being told, you should be grateful you have a ride at all. You know, why are you complaining? You know, this is your fault. You're not following the rules. You're not out here, you know, in your time window. You know, you're causing us to be late. One time I got on the bus, the driver was angry at me because supposedly I was 15 minutes late. I checked my watch. I boarded the bus 1 minute after I was told that my ride was coming. 1 minute. And he said I was 15 minutes late. He said, this is your fault. I'm going to have to go the speed limit to pick up and drop off 2 other people before I can get you home. I was on the bus an hour and a half that day. I didn't make it into my garage before I had to go to the bathroom. And this is happening to us over and over, and we're being blamed for this. And the 2 people riding on board with me, the driver was so stressed and he was so worried about being on time that he was ignoring them. One woman almost fell. She stood up too soon. He decided to go to the second door. She stood up. She almost fell. Another woman was trying to get his attention to bring her walker to the front so she could go down the steps to get to her walker. He ignored her or didn't hear her because he was so worried about time. And she had to step over my scooter and the securements on the floor to get to the back of the bus. Other times we've been packed onto buses like packages in a FedEx truck. Literally, I've been on the bus where we have stacked people in, and these are small rear-loading buses where the only exit is out the back. And we have been stacked on that bus so much that the driver can't get through to secure our equipment down. We feel like, you know, we're just like prisoners on this bus. One day I sent my friend a photograph of a walker, a heavy walker, sitting in front of me on the steps with no securement at all. It could have been a projectile if that driver had gotten in an accident, and I'm surprised they didn't because the driver was so rushed to get to all these rides. The computer is constantly telling them they need to do. We were so scared that day because my scooter wasn't tied down properly, the walker behind us wasn't tied down properly, and the one in front of me wasn't secured at all. So, you know, and that was 4 people, so they had to drop off 3 people before I could get home. And I was the first one on board. And that happened another day. There were 3 people that day, and we were packed on there like sardines. I mean, this has got to stop. I mean, we're worried about safety. We're worried about people missing medical appointments, and we're worried about our safety on the bus, and we're worried about the safety of the drivers out in traffic, trying to navigate all this, and thinking, oh my gosh, on-time performance, on-time performance. So the drivers are either racing, and I mean, we were careening around corners. The lady next to me was saying, oh my gosh, there's not enough grab bars. I can't stay in my seat. I just had surgery yesterday. I'm worried about my stitches. You know, I mean, or another day, the driver was driving ridiculously slow, and we found out later that was because she was ahead of schedule. And they were telling her, oh, if you find out, you know, if you get there too early, then that's going to throw the schedule off. So we want you to be on time. So she was, you know, driving ridiculously slow, you know, which is also a traffic hazard. So we're worried about injuries and accidents. That's the first thing that needs to be addressed. And then we're worried about these ADA violations. Keeping people, especially elderly people and people with disabilities, on a bus for over an hour and up to 3 hours are ADA violations. And I've heard wind from passengers, other passengers, that, you know, class action lawsuits, formal reports to the Federal Department of Justice. I mean, those are consequences of ADA violations. So we just want you guys to know about these things. And they're serious. They're serious. And it's causing daily, stress for us, stress for the drivers, unnecessary anxiety. And another problem with scheduling is so many of us, more of us, need subscription services. And that means people that have consistent schedules, professionals, Many of us with disabilities who use this service, we're professionals. We're out there working. We're going to regular appointments. We have time schedules we have to meet. We don't have time to sit on the phone and wait for phone calls just to schedule our rides for the next week, which we may not be able to schedule anyway because they're already full. So we don't have time for that. And we could clear up a lot of those scheduling hassles if we had more subscription rides. People that have consistent schedules, they can give that information to Embark, and then we can have, a stress-free day knowing that we have a consistent pickup and drop-off to our work, to our medical appointments, to our physical therapy, whatever. We have that guaranteed ride. And I don't see why we can't offer more of those services. And so many of us have been requesting subscription services and turned away because, we don't have enough slots, or we don't have enough drivers, or we don't have enough buses. There should be dedicated buses for people with subscription ride service. So these are the kinds of things we want you to negotiate when you renew the Embark contract in June. And let me tell you, we've been working on suggested solutions. So let me tell you, we're not just complainers. We want you to know what's going on, but we also want you to know that we're working on solutions. And we're willing to work with you, we're willing to work with Embark to make this work, because it's an essential service for us. Okay, here are our requests. Bring back our drivers to Norman. Embark management made the decision to take our schedulers away from Norman, put them in Oklahoma City. So they're not here to communicate with drivers. Drivers used to pop into the office. They could handle any kind of errors, any kind of schedule delays, any irregularities on the bus. If somebody had a packed schedule, they could take care of it right then. Now our schedulers are up in Oklahoma City, and we're talking to schedulers up there that don't know us, and we have to start over. Every time we call in, we have to start over with somebody new. And we also learned if we pressed the wrong button when we called in to schedule, and we had to leave a message because we were on hold for 2 cycles and couldn't get through to anybody and had to leave a message for our ride requests. If we left it on the wrong line, then the Norman schedulers didn't even get it. They didn't even get the ride request. So then the next time we called in, we were like, oh, did you get my ride request for the next 3 days? Oh no, we didn't get it. You must have left it on the wrong line. So we learned that too. So please bring our schedulers back to Norman and put all of our Norman people in one office again so that we have access, and the drivers especially have access to them. And give autonomy back to the drivers to make changes in the schedule in real time, to communicate with each other, to communicate with us, to communicate with the scheduler, with the dispatchers. There have been times when I've had to be on the bus a long time, and the dispatcher in Norman has tried to make a change to the computer to accommodate that, to move me to somebody else so I didn't have to be on the bus so long. The computer kept dinging it back to the original driver. The dispatcher tried 3 times to change the schedule, and the computer moved it back onto the original bus. So he said, I'm really sorry, we can't help you, you're just gonna have to stay on the bus. So the computer won't even let me make a change. So we need to take care of that. We need to take care of the Norman office. We need more subscription services and dedicated buses, like I explained. Driver autonomy. We'd like to reinstate the monthly passenger liaison advisory committee like I used to chair, for 10 years. That worked really well. We wouldn't even have to be coming to you with these concerns today if we had had those kind of meetings going on monthly. We could have handled a lot of these frustrations and a lot of these problems at the meeting. Those were great meetings, and I thought they were required when you had a federally funded service. I thought those meetings were required to have a liaison committee between passengers and staff to handle problems like this and to take care of any passenger concerns. So we'd like to reinstate those. We'd also like to hold monthly information meetings at the Wellness Center where so many of our passengers come or work. We'd like to invite Taylor and city staff and Embark staff to come to the Wellness Center once a month and meet with us and give information exchange about fixed routes and all kinds of things that people are curious about and need to know. We need to have that essential information. We'd like, as in Oklahoma City, to create a Norman Mayors Committee on Disability Concerns. That's been a committee that many of my friends have served on in Oklahoma City. It's a very helpful committee. Again, it can handle concerns like this on a regular basis without frustrations building. Please allow more seniors to qualify for the Plus service on age alone. A lot of our people are trying to get on the Plus service and they're being turned away because they're being told, well, you're able to walk to a bus stop. Some of us, thankfully, God, grateful to God that we still have, the ability to walk to bus stops. But, that might be nice on a nice day, but what if we're having a medical problem? What if, the weather's bad, And then many of our close bus stops have been taken away now. So these passengers that are being told, you're able to walk to a bus stop, you don't need the Plus service. Now they're having to walk longer distances. They're getting stuck on pedestrian, crosswalks and islands in the middle of busy traffic. It's kind of scary walking to bus stops, especially if you don't have a good means of travel. So, we really would like more seniors to be approved for the Plus service, even if they can't walk to bus stops. They need those options. They need those transportation options. And I believe we should have those on age alone. The CART service used to approve people on age alone, regardless of their medical condition. All right, and then we need more transparency of information. And I think we can handle that through these committees that we're suggesting. And I know you all have way too many meetings, all of us do, but those committees really helped to take care of these problems before they got to this point. So please include these requests in your negotiations with Embark and in the contract renewal. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for sharing your experience. I assume you all support or have similar experiences as Chris. I appreciate you sharing that and for offering suggestions for how we can improve service. I think staff's listening and taking notes, and we'll continue to discuss, maybe get some answers to some of the questions you have too, and then see what we can do about addressing this new software and issues that it may be having, and definitely the committee stuff that you suggested too. So we'll take all of that, staff will, and we'll continue to discuss it, and appreciate you coming. I've got to move on to the next items, but I do appreciate all of you being here to support Chris and all of yourselves. And I think this is all a service that we are glad that we have in Norman, that we are able to offer to the entire city limits, as we were talking about. We're only required to offer it within a mile, 3/4 of a mile of the fixed route. But we made the decision many years ago in Norman that we would serve the whole city limits. And so,
Thank you.
so I appreciate that, and we'll see what we can do to address those concerns and make improvements and get some answers too for you.
Thank you.
Okay.
We appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right, Thank you all for
Absolutely.
listening. And, is this open? Okay. Our next item on the agenda, thank you very much, Taylor. Our next item on the agenda is a discussion regarding project design for the 24th Avenue Northwest and 48th Avenue Northwest widening projects. And we have Tim here to talk from staff to talk to us about that.
Good afternoon. I'm Tim Miles, city engineer, and I'm going to talk to you about these projects. If I can get this all loaded up. Okay, so we're coming to you tonight, or late afternoon, to talk to you about the 48th Avenue Northwest and the 24th Avenue Northeast proposed design changes, some things that we found during the preliminary design that we want to talk to you about, and maybe see if you agree with some of the things we're proposing. So this is just the location map. You can see the two projects. The 48th Avenue Northwest project is between Robinson Street and Rock Creek Road, kind of on the west side of the developed area of Norman. Similarly, 24th Avenue Northeast is between Rock Creek Road and Tecumseh Road, kind of on the east side of the developed area. So both of these projects are in our 2019 transportation bond program. And during the early design analysis, we basically found some physical constraints and developmental patterns that have warranted us to consider other options in the design, in the final design of these plans. So basically, some of these proposed changes are slightly different than the descriptions in the 2019 transportation bond, and that's why we want to bring them to you. We think that these improvements still meet the intent of the original projects. It's going to be a less expensive project, which we're all sensitive to with the way inflation since 2019 has really made it difficult to complete some of these projects. And we also believe that it'll still improve the level of service that's out there today and really not affect it in the future. And these are the typical sections from our comprehensive transportation plan. Both of these roadways fall under the minor urban arterial typical sections. And so these are the three we typically work with. There's the one lane of traffic in each direction with a landscape median. We also have the 3-lane section with 1 lane of traffic in each direction and a center turn lane. And then the 4-lane section with 2 lanes of traffic in each direction. These all show the on-street bike lanes, but we also a lot of times use off-street, the 10-foot wide multimodal path instead in situations that we think it will benefit. And in both of these cases, we're recommending that as part of our proposed improvements. So the first one I want to talk about in a little more detail is the 48th Avenue Northwest project. The bond language in that called for a 3-lane roadway, the entire length of the project, basically between Robinson and Rock Creek Road. And that fits with the current daily traffic, the 4,200 vehicles per day. This is one of those areas that it's either already generally fully developed or it's floodplain. And so these numbers over time really aren't going to increase much more than what they are today. And you can see on the east side of the road, I guess I don't have a pointer to use, but on the right side is basically developed with a little bit of floodplain kind of on the north end of the project. And then the left side of the roadway, or the west side, is almost all floodplain. It's rural land. And basically, we want to construct the project as intended, but we want to be mindful of the floodplain and really the cost of this project. And so what we found is there's very few access points along this segment of roadway that require the 3 lanes for the turn lanes. So basically what we're proposing is instead of having a 3-lane roadway the entire length of the project, we're proposing just widening at the intersections. Because the left side or the west side of the roadway, it's gonna be very costly, difficult to ever develop. And if it does, then we can add additional lanes as a part of the development project. But I have, on the following slides, I basically want to walk through what I'm trying to explain here.
And just to be clear, Tim.
Okay.
Sure. The bond project is from Robinson to Tecumseh, but you're just talking about the first
So there's
line.
2 phases of the bond. This is the first phase, yes, from Robinson to Rock Creek. We really haven't gone to design at all in the next phase, so it could be a different scenario altogether. But in this area, there's so few turn lanes so few turns into residential areas that we think we can reduce a lot of pavement in this section. And so this kind of illustrates what I'm talking about. So the left side here is the south end of the project, and it continues northward. At the existing Robinson Street, there's 4 lanes there today, and so we would maintain those lanes. So we'd have 1 northbound lane, 1 southbound through lane, and then a left turn and a right turn, just to fit that existing configuration. And then the first intersection you come to is really close to Robinson Street. So we basically,
Davenbrook.
yeah.
There's only 3. I know
Yeah.
Davenbrook, Stonegate, and Saddleback.
Right, correct. And they're mostly on the south half of the project. So the south half is really consistent with what the project description is in the bond language, but we benefit more for this in the north half of the project. So as you can see here, the top half of the roadway is in a 3-lane section, and then once we get past Davenbrook Drive, we transition to a 2-lane section. And that helps keep us out of the floodplain area and reduce the need for us to come up with compensatory storage in that area. Then as we get close to Stonegate, we widen back out again. And these are all really minor transitions. So when you're driving down the road, you don't even realize you're really getting a little bit wider or not. But then between Stonegate and Saddleback, they're close enough together that basically would maintain the 3-lane section like we would, like has been proposed in the bond language. But then once we get past Saddleback, for close to a half a mile, we basically would propose a 2-lane roadway because there's 1 minor single house entrance and then no other drives basically between this area and Rock Creek Road. So this saves a lot of costs on the project. It keeps us from having to get into the floodplain, and it really doesn't affect capacity. There's no turn movement, slowing traffic down. And then when we get to Rock Creek Road, then we would widen back out to the 3-lane sections because we want to be able to have the 3 lanes in each direction in the center turn lane. So that's kind of what we're proposing on this roadway. And then moving on to,
On that
Sure.
one, would the length of 48th Avenue from Robinson to Rock Creek still be reconstructed from its
yes,
current
yeah, it's completely
country road?
reconstructed.
So it'd still be
Yes.
reconstructed, brand new street? We're just talking about
Yes,
Including curb and gutter.
curb and gutter
We
side.
bring it up to the modern, but I think the staff and the consultant have done a good look, looking at this together of what realistically is needed here. And I think that this is, again, with there not being any turns, there's no reason to have a middle turn lane if you can't turn anywhere. So this is kind of what the recommendation is here.
The bond language is just improvements, right?
The bond language does not give the number of lanes, it's just that
Right.
information that we presented at the public meetings. And that's what we try to stay true to without going out and coming to council and making sure that we're all in agreement. But yes, it just says improvements to. And then it's that information that we presented publicly that we really want to stay true to, but in these cases, we think we can maybe do better for the community.
Councilor Montoya.
So what type of stormwater improvements, drainage are going to be a part of this, if any? Because so when we have a lot of rain,
Mhm.
on 48th Avenue, those old drainage ditches, there's constantly standing water, and like with that polo field over there, and it turns into a lake when we have a lot of rain. So what type of improvements?
Yeah, so I believe the water all runs basically from west to east, or east to west towards the floodplain. And so the storm pipelines underneath the roadway have been increased to help get the water to pass through there. But in those fields, especially on the west side and even on the north, I could go back to that. All those areas that have the light blue, they're gonna still stay in water. It's just they're low-lying areas.
Will there be any improvements to help the water move and not just stay stagnant?
And there's gonna be improvements to the roadway to keep it off the road, but, and also, yes, there will be new storm sewer pipelines underneath the road to help encourage that. But when the water's up high enough during significant rains, it does take a while to get that passed on through. There's only so much we can do in this area.
Okay.
The improvements to be able to get that to move better from Robinson Street, basically Robinson Street is where that bottleneck is. It would take improvements at that location and even further south to really be able to get that water that ponds in the big field out. We're gonna try to make the roadway better. We'll be getting rid of the ditches on the east side of the road, so that won't look as bad.
Okay,
So where the current residences are, and then where the current farmland is, there's just not a lot we can do without a very large project involving the private property, and that's really where the problems kind of manifest themselves. But we're gonna we will be improving the roadway and the east side significantly.
okay.
Adding
Thank
the
you.
curb, adding the curb helps quite a bit.
Adding curb's gonna help, and, we've even looked
Yeah, for
at,
sure.
in some places, instead of putting a pipe system in with inlets, that doesn't make sense, because the water backs up, it can't go anywhere. We just create another pond. We've actually looked at taking all the water across and using curb cuts to let the water off the roadway, so that we're getting rid of a potential problem and trying to find ways to, we're trying to do what we can within the limits of the project.
I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And one thing I did kind of gloss over a little bit was, so we're proposing on the right side or the east side of the roadway to have an off-street 10-foot hike bike trail or multi-use path, because that's where the residents are. And so that's what we're proposing. It's actually on these drawings. That's kind of the darker, you see it on the right side of it. Where we have room for separation between the existing road, we do create separation, but down on the north end where we have those open ditches and stuff that we're having to work with, we have it kind of pulled up closer to the edge of the road, but still, on this segment, it makes a lot more sense than on-street roads.
Councilor
I
Pico.
think you just answered it. You said that's above the curb. That's not on street.
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
thank you.
yes. So we kind of walked through all these. So 24th Avenue Northeast, that's a little bit different as situation as well between Rock Creek and Tecumseh. Again, it has low volumes. It has the 3,800 vehicles per day. The proposed language in the bond was for a 4-lane roadway here. We don't believe that that's warranted in this area for several reasons. I'll try to go through that. One is that this whole section is basically comprised of large acreage residential homes. And so in order for someone to develop along this segment of 24th, you're gonna have to buy multiple properties. And that makes it a lot more difficult to develop than if you're just trying to buy one big section from someone. So we believe that this is gonna take a long time, if ever, that it really turns into neighborhoods, I guess. And so for that reason, we think with the low traffic volumes and the rural nature of this area, that we think a 3-lane section would make more sense. And one of the issues that we're having is with OG&E. A lot of their utilities are outside our right-of-way in their own private easements. And to do the full 4-lane roadway, the cost would be 100% the city's because they're in their own easements. If they're in city right-of-way, then we can require them to move as needed. And so there'll be a lot of additional expense that really wouldn't be required if we just go with the 3-lane section, which would accommodate all these residential areas or rural areas at this time. And then again, if it needs to be widened in the future, then the developments could do that as needed. We did apply for a grant on this, and it was the weirdest situation I've ever had because an MPDG grant, I don't remember what that stands for, but basically the reviewers made a mistake, and really this project ranked a lot higher than what they thought it did because they had it in the wrong category. We're still working with them to see if maybe we're going to get federal funds for this, but one of the negative parts in the debrief when we had with them was that the benefit to the cost ratio was not high enough because of the cost of the project. And if it were a 3-lane section, it would score even higher than what we submitted. So we're hopeful that even if we can't get this reversed and get the funds, that when we reapply for it, and none of us really know what these new grant programs are going to be like with all the changes in the federal government, but if we reapply for it, we're hopefully that we could get the federal funds, as soon as the next fiscal year and get to start constructing this instead of keep submitting on ACOG projects if these are less successful.
This is definitely one I thought would probably end up being in the same situation as 36th Avenue Northwest, being a outlier widening project to 4 lanes, and concern about this and the Tecumseh one also getting those ACOG funds ever too.
Yeah,
So,
you're correct.
Councilmember Hinkle?
I have a concern about this one. I know that it's way before my time, so really just clarification questions. On the widening portion from Alameda to Robinson, where it's gone 4 lanes, with any widening on this portion, I know there's not a lot of residential there, but will the intersection at Tecumseh and 24th Northeast, will that still be a stop sign, or will that be?
I believe it will until it warrants a signal, yes.
My concern is, right now coming up 24th, when you get to Robinson, you have the choice of continuing north through Hall Park and then on to the 2-lane road that this would essentially be replacing,
Yes, yes.
which diverts traffic down Robinson and possibly up 12th Street to get to Tecumseh. The reason I say that is because the stretch of Tecumseh from 12th Avenue Northeast to 24th Avenue Northeast is 2-lane asphalt with lots of rising and sloping hills. And so, the downward grade to get to that stoplight at Tecumseh and 12th Street is dangerous in itself. So when I see this project and potentially creating more visitors per day up through that route, that existing road of Tecumseh and what that intersection could become with more traffic seems very dangerous.
So that is one of our future bond program projects that we have not started designing yet.
The Tecumseh Road section is also in the 2019 bond program.
Yes.
We anticipated exactly what you're talking about.
Okay.
And so we did that. And the whole goal was, with us doing those improvements on, and I can speak to this because I was the one that was here for all of that. We did that intentionally because 12th Avenue and Tecumseh and all those areas were really starting to become a lot of cars, and it's kind of getting that next outer ring. So that's why we did absolutely anticipate that there'd have to be changes on Tecumseh for this to flow properly. And, when we get to that project, we may be having a very similar discussion to this one on, can we do this as a 3-lane? And, if there were to be a large development, like Tim said, they could come in and we could require for them to do an acceleration and deceleration lane for their entrance, which would basically, in effect, make that section 4-lane, or at least 2-lane in that one direction. So, there's opportunities that if we were to start having more turning movements, there are ways that we could remedy that with that growth as necessary. If the growth doesn't come, then we have a road that we think will still serve well and be able to be safe. And this will be another roadway. We will be coming in. There'll be a full reconstruct, curb and gutter. Probably gonna wind up doing the 10-foot multimodal trail on one side, regular sidewalk on the other, and bring this up to a current modern standard.
I guess I would just like to consider this and that to be more of a companion piece than the other project would have.
And on that, do you have one?
No, I was just gonna say, I like these proposed changes. I know we've talked about not widening to 4 lanes, and this is a nice economical and potentially elegant solution to some financial challenges on this, so.
We appreciate that
Well, I
feedback.
think that we've been very lucky that with the CTP and the way that it's written, we're given options where we can work with different items and look at it and make decisions based on that are appropriate with each segment of roadway.
Councilor Pico.
I was just gonna say that anytime you bring, say, a 4-lane road turned into a 3-lane road, I'm gonna support it. So, thank you.
I also do like 3-lane streets too. I guess a couple comments about it would be, I know that it's kind of envisioned, since 24th Avenue is 4 lanes from Highway 9 all the way to Rock Creek Road. And then the idea in the 2019 bond is extending that to Tecumseh and then improving that section of Tecumseh. And then that's 4 lanes all the way from 24th East all the way to I-30, well, all the way to Western or 60th. And so it created this outer loop around the urban area without it being a highway or a turnpike, but our own kind of just arterial outer loop. And I know we did approve a pretty large development at Tecumseh and 24th, not in the last year, I want to say, just a housing development. I can't recall if it had any turnouts onto 24th or if they were only on Tecumseh, but.
I think they were only on Tecumseh.
Okay, and so I was wondering about that and that impact on it. And then just also any kind of projections or anything in the AIM plan about this area and a future development over the next 20 years, since it is within the urban footprint that we already have.
Okay, so the AIM plan does still maintain these as minor urban arterials, so they don't change with the new plan. So that still gives us the indication that it's gonna be more of that vehicles per day driven decision-making than anything else. And with, even if that large development were to come to fruition, at that point, we could add that lane across their frontage for acceleration and deceleration to where their turning movements wouldn't be impacting through traffic. So we could still maintain traffic flow without there being a lot of braking movements to impact them. I share your concern. I think when we started talking about this, we kind of did discuss that, the vision of that outer loop. But we, obviously, a lot has changed. I think that a lot of the attitudes in the community have changed on road widths but this is one, we're at 3,800 vehicles per day now. And so I think that we could certainly make this fit.
The OCD in me wants it to be the same from Highway 9 all the way and then all the way. But I agree, and I think constraints about OG&E and cost savings and maybe it's scoring better for federal funding if it's 3 lanes. And then if it's 3 lanes from the get-go, then we don't have to talk about road diets or anything else in the future and get people all riled up. So, and then we also have another 2019 bond project that is Rock Creek Road from
12th.
Queenston,
yeah,
Queenston
because it is.
to 24th.
Yes.
So
Correct.
that was kind of a, yeah. And that kind of, that completes that square mile between 12th, 24th to come to Rock Creek as far as it having improved sections. So, yeah, those were all 3 separate 2019 bond.
From Queenston to 24th?
Because it's already
It's
been
already
done from
wider.
12th to Kingston.
Queenston.
Yeah, no, I know, but Queenston runs north and south parallel. to
Princeton.
24th.
Right, on Rock Creek Road. So Rock
it is
Creek Road, when it hits
Bruckner on the
Queenston, goes
south
from
side.
4 lanes to
Too many
2.
voices going here. Say that again.
Rock Creek Road is 4 lanes going east until it gets to Queenston, and then it goes back down to a
Right.
2-lane country road. It would continue being widened all the way to 24th.
Gotcha.
As part
Sorry, I
of
thought we were talking about widening Queenston.
Oh,
What?
okay, I don't know.
Okay, that's all we have on that.
And just for you all's information, the grant that Tim was referring to was applied through the Absentee Shawnee Tribe.
Cool. Awesome. Any opportunity to partner with them is okay. And what are the timeline for these 2 projects? What are you thinking?
Well, that depends a lot on federal funding. I think 24th would be the soonest one, because I think with the absentee Shawnee, we'll probably, we could be successful even next year. The other one is probably more like 2029.
Okay, and would that probably be the same as the second phase of that 48th Avenue?
Yeah, they would be close.
Okay, thank you guys. All right, our third item on the discussion, on the agenda today is a discussion regarding the potential installation of street bollards on Campus Corner. A thing we've been discussing for a couple of years, so might have some updated information.
Kid duty.
All right.
You're gonna miss this?
I really don't want to is the worst part, but I watched the replay.
We'll be as quick as we can. All right, so this is an update from where we landed the last time we talked about this. We've talked about this a number of times with you all, but we're back today. So what we want to do is we want to go through kind of a timeline of what has happened since we first talked to you. I think it was at Baca. That was coming on 2.5 years ago, yeah. Kind of talk through some issues that some of the issues you're aware of, some you may not be aware of with the in-street bollards that we had talked about early on. Then we want to get into some staff discussions. We brought police and fire here to kind of stand with us on this, so it's a united front. And then talk through some alternatives of things that we think we need to do in order to really address the problems that need to be addressed.
Joseph Hill, Streets Program Manager. So, yeah, just to reiterate, we've been on this topic for a couple of years now. Started in April of '23. One of the problems there, obviously, is the work period. The area that was chosen for this pilot, you essentially have June and July to complete your work. So that has been one of the challenges. But really want to key into where we left off last year. We were working on quotes in May of '24 to get in there in the summer and get some bollards installed. And some internal discussions with staff, some comments made by the Campus Corner merchants, raised some red flags that we kind of pumped the brakes. And we've essentially spent the last year in multiple meetings with staff to police, fire, and emergency services to shift directions. Go ahead.
So this is the location that we identified back in '23, I guess it was. We were gonna have, we're gonna try to close off 5 areas around Campus Corner. The north leg of the Boyd Street Asp intersection, the north leg of the Boyd Street Buchanan intersection, the north leg of the Asp White intersection, the east leg of the White Buchanan intersection, and the south leg of the White Buchanan intersection. Is this still me?
I can take it if you want.
Go ahead.
All right. So last year when we met, some of the items, last in May of '24, we did have a representative from Campus Corner that met with us. The bollards that were selected initially, we all recall that they were key operated. Put a key in, raise it, lock it. Same situation. To put it down, Campus Corner Merchants had some concerns about who would be responsible. Would they have keys? Would they not have keys? Who at the city would have keys? And we just noted on here that this is their event, not necessarily the city's event. Now, the city does provide support service, obviously, but they're the ones who kind of manage all of the elements of that event and the limits of that event. Following that discussion, we also had some discussion with our emergency responders, both police and fire. And a lot of questions were raised just about what impacts could take place if one of these bollards malfunctioned in the event trying to get into a Campus Corner event for a fire or medical emergency. They malfunction while they're up. What do we do? Or they malfunction and we can't get them out of the ground and secure the event. What do we do?
Councilor Pickett.
Not to derail, sorry, I'm just kind of curious what we do now with like the big water barriers, the big concrete barriers. You know, if there's a huge crowd, we have to move those for police and fire to get into a zone.
Okay.
What's kind of the protocol for that? I'm just kind of curious.
So the concrete barricades right now, like Norman Music Fest,
Right.
last year was the first time we put concrete barricades out. They are a piece of the puzzle.
Okay.
So where we put those, they are fixed. They're strategically placed, and right now we have access points. So Norman Music Fest, there are several points that we have created, ingress and egress outside of those concrete barricades. And that's the use of those. So, but if a fire truck needed to, they could very easily push one of those out of.
Okay.
It would be pretty easy for a fire truck, I believe, to move.
Yeah, if I can, and Joe did a great job of kind of explaining that. We have designated ingress and egress points at those events, especially Music Festival is a great example this week. So we know where those are ahead of time, and they're not concrete barricades. They're things that we can move much more quickly. And if they are struck, like one of the issues of the bollards, and I'm sure Joe and David will get into it, so I apologize, I'm probably getting ahead of you, is if a bollard's hit, it's stuck. And especially from the law enforcement standpoint, if we're talking an intentional effort, then there's no access beyond that once it's hit. So it becomes a compounding effect unintentionally. So bollards are, because of the permanency, they're a much greater concern for us from an incident response.
Okay.
In addition to that, and I know they'll get into this in a second, and I apologize, but they will, the permanency of them limits our ability to adapt to the changing needs of that neighborhood or that community, like the Campus Corner footprint that they showed. It's kind of what you all probably, I know we've worked on this for years, is really kind of that, except for Boyd, is kind of that festival feel Campus Corner footprint. That's changing, like dramatically changing every year, especially right now with SEC and football and events, and bollards are permanent, like there's no moving them. Whereas with some other options, and they'll get to that we can be much more adaptable to the needs of the specific events.
That helps a lot, I appreciate that. Originally, when I first thought of this idea, it was for Norman Music Fest, or it was from the Main Street area for Second Friday art walks and all these things. But we decided on Campus Corner because it was more of a smaller test kitchen to really kind of test the proof of concept on this. So everything we're talking about today, I'd love to see if it could be translated over to Main Street as well at some point. So just keep that in mind.
To your point, we believe we've tested it without putting anything in the ground.
I like it.
That is where we are going in this discussion.
Okay, all right. Sorry, I didn't mean to derail that there.
Not much to add there other than, outside of the safety factors and the concerns about the permanent fixture of the bollards, to key on that a little bit more. If one gets hit and it's stuck in the up position, the only option is to cut the road and remove it. You don't just swap it out with another piece of equipment. So it's an extensive replacement. The security and access control though too, as we started talking, you think about how we all have to fob in and out of our offices and everything every day. Imagine what I would assume is probably 100+ keys for these bollards floating out in the community amongst our staff. We're human. We can lose keys. Keys can get stolen. Keys can get copied. All the different things that could take place. A lot of gaps to control the security of those fixed utilities.
So then in January, New Orleans happened. It started raising a lot of new issues with, were these bollards traffic rated to begin with? Would they be able to stop anything? Turns out that the ones that we had ordered were more aesthetic bollards than they were safety bollards. They wouldn't stop hardly anything. I think it would stop a very small vehicle going 5 miles an hour. Is that what we heard?
If you fell asleep at the wheel in idle in your F-150, it'd probably stop you.
But if you were
If you
hell
had
bent on
bad
getting in there.
intentions, you would blow right through.
And that's really when we got headlong, I guess, into discussions with the police department and the fire department. And that's really why we're here as a group here, to kind of lead us through what needs to happen here. We talked with the vendor, we kind of got some feedback from you all at a presentation that, what are our options? Are there bollards that are traffic rated? So we reached out to the vendor that we had reached out to with the original bollards, and yes, they are available, but the footprint that's going to be required to install those in the ground is just mind-boggling. And we know personally from the investigation that we did in trying to locate the original bollards, there's utilities all under all those streets, and you're not going to have the real estate available to put the system in the ground that you need to put in the ground. Not to mention the costs are astronomically higher than the ones we purchased. You're talking like $5,000 per bollard instead of $100 per bollard. So I mean, it just grows from there. So this kind of led us to the realization that maybe bollards is not the way to go. Maybe we need to be looking at something else.
So as David said, we talked with the manufacturer, got a little bit of information about the different ratings, and so they do have some pretty large bollards. We've also talked with other people like Tinker Air Force Base that have these bollards in the ground, these larger security type bollards. Very high maintenance, so added to an already thin maintenance team to go out and maintain those. Regular malfunctions, we just kind of went down the list. With other people who have these larger systems in place. They're also not really relatable to we're the city of Norman. These are military installations and high security installations that typically use that type of equipment. But we've got a plan. We've got a roadmap coming up here, I think, of some options that we can move forward with in short order, cover all the things that you raised.
I'm just gonna ask, were you able to meet with Campus Corner Merchants again after going down this path?
We have not. We have not had this discussion with them yet. If I recall correctly, now again, we've slept since 23, right? This actually wasn't brought to us by them initially. This was a council request for this pilot project. The last we spoke with the Campus Corner Merchants, the last we heard from them, there was a lot of concern about the types of bollards and whether or not they were actually going to secure the area of their event. As Major Barber said, the event is changing. We've heard a lot about potential changes within that event. So our current pilot, just point blank, is not applicable at this point. We would have to consider other locations, I think, just from what we're hearing. But yeah, originally this was brought on by council, not the merchants. So we felt we needed to explore some options before we even have discussions.
I was just gonna say, you know, having sat through this as it's been going, we got contacted by them again, I wanna say early, maybe January, December. and their tune had changed a little bit. I still think they're concerned about like the traffic part of it and stopping malicious drivers. But they had some other concerns, and so they had turned more favorable to ways, mainly it was between Boyd and Buchanan, I wanna say, no. What's White, that one. And
Strip.
yeah, basically on ASP, because they were concerned about a car club and a motorcycle club that were not really frequenting the establishments and were there with their own liquor and agenda and not really mixing with the student life, and they were interested in discouraging that, and so they had come back around to the bollards and were asking us for a progress update on it. So just throwing that out there.
And that they were interested in closing the street more often.
Yeah, every weekend actually is what they told us.
That was, I mean, that was the intent behind this for me, is just to make that right there just easier. Like, you don't have to go through the permitting process, you don't have to hire all the security, mobilized barriers, I mean, it's literally
Right now, it
turnkey.
takes a crane truck
Yeah.
has to come out
That's what I
and
mean.
lift
That's-
the roadblock
Yeah.
things off at 10 o'clock at night or whatever. But they also want to keep this, like if the street is closed for an event and it's in the evening, like they want to keep it closed until it's closing
Sunday.
time.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
reopen, because last year we had a couple times where the streets closed and then we reopened it at like 10
Yeah.
or 10:30, and it's like, now it's chaos. And people are flooding in here with their trucks and they're revving up, and and people are walking in the street because they've been walking in the street for a couple hours because it's been closed, and so it's
There's several factors. It's probably, I know you and I have had these discussions
Yeah.
quite over the years. There's a lot of factors in that. Last year, that was done intentionally because when we left those roads closed overnight, it became a street party until 4 and 5 in the morning that was uncontrollable.
Huh.
So we
Yeah.
worked with them, but by opening the street, while not ideal for sure, especially from a safety standpoint, having that large of a presence, especially after the first couple games, we had a lot of really big problems down there
Yeah.
that got really close to being out of control. By diversifying that crowd and kind of creating that different environment, it helped break that up. So there's some intentionality there, but it's a challenge for sure. It is far from an ideal, either option is
Yeah.
far from ideal for either side, but we do have a really good relationship with them and we work with them on those decisions in particular.
Yeah, anyways, just wanted to throw that into the conversation because that was our latest update from that particular set of merchants. And I think some people have cycled in and out of that Campus Corner Association board.
So that's interesting. And the last meeting that we had in May of '24, reviewing those minutes, you think about that, they wanna close it more often, but they don't want the responsibility of managing those bollards, right? So that's still gonna require staff, it's still going to require barricades to be delivered to manage traffic and direct traffic around those road closures. So the impact is still the same as today.
If they were
and
just
essentially-
interested in a section of ASP being closed, that's not quite the same impact as the other footprint that we looked at earlier.
But all the same problems still exist.
Oh, you mean
The
like
same
routing?
issues with emergency response, the same issues with if we're trying to use these bollards in some way. And I think that what we're trying to do is we're saying the bollards are just a no-go.
Yeah.
Both, and that's based on, I mean, I'm sorry, this drove me nuts.
Go ahead.
Please, go ahead.
I'm used to being up here and it's bothering me, okay? But based on the fact that the responsibility, who's gonna be in control, who's gonna, the whole security thing, the emergency access,
Those questions are still gonna be there.
all,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
we,
think
we're not
so.
solving it. So what we'd like to do is move into a couple of options that we've found that the three departments have worked together towards that may be future and possible solutions in place of this that we think could actually be usable and also mobile to where it could be
Flexible.
the UNP, it could be downtown, it could be, we can move it, something that's more, that we could use in a better, more useful way.
Just real quick to the key point, originally when I had this idea, they were pneumatic bollards that you press a button and they all come up, and the button was at the EOC. So it was literally, there was one central station, everybody was talking, it was, so just
And that would be cool.
I realize the price tag on those bollards is probably a little bit out of the pocket.
And then the communication system of having that.
Absolutely.
I mean,
those
Again,
get
it's supposed to be
expensive
just-
quick.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But you still have the issue of anytime something goes up and
that
down,
makes sense,
it,
yeah.
it invites things into the
Well, the idea of
cavity
that
that holds it.
getting out of plumb and jamming it
Yeah.
up and like, that makes perfect
Yeah.
sense.
Or just dirt
Dirt's
and
always gonna
grime
get in there, yeah.
or electrical.
Okay, that's the last I'll say about bollards.
But to follow up on the first question that you asked, we fully expected, at least Joe and I did, I don't know about, I don't wanna speak for police and fire necessarily, but if we got good direction tonight, we know that the merchants are gonna be probably one of the next people we're gonna have to talk to.
Okay,
So,
yeah,
we,
well,
we were already thinking that way.
just some things to think about when we look at these options that might help guide us into
Right.
knowing what they're kind of looking at and expecting.
And, go ahead.
In that process, so we have a team that's been, they're gonna get to this again, I'm getting ahead of myself, sorry. We have a team that's been meeting, working on this, and that next phase, there's two kind of simultaneous teams, but the university's a part of that too.
Yeah.
While not city assets, the reality is we're already planning well into next football season. Our next phase after the feedback from you all on this is gonna include the merchants because there's some changes we anticipate with football. That's gonna change some of their options as well that we have to start planning for.
To that point, can we do some circle around Norman Music Fest this weekend and maybe take some notes about the new potential solutions and how we might retrofit those into the.
It's been part of this 100%.
Absolutely, thank you.
That is one of the cruxes that started all of those needs.
I love it, thank you.
I'll be setting barricades early tomorrow morning.
We already talked a lot about what's on this slide because we've just been having the discussions, but I wanted to make the point before we got into the discussions, but now it's kind of after, but you know, there's a lot of talk about the bollards that we've already purchased. Those bollards, we believe, have a use somewhere. So they're not just gonna sit in our yard rusting. We're gonna put them into use somewhere, whether it's in Legacy Park, for example, or Reeves Park maybe. There are places where there's not vehicular movements into that we could use those. So I wanted to put that to rest before we got anybody too concerned about that. So a little bit about alternatives. You know, Scott kind of stole a little bit of the thunder on this slide, but one of the things that we really want to do is have a system that we could pick up and carry to multiple locations. It's not just a Campus Corner solution. It's not just a music festival solution. It could go anywhere. But at the same time, we need things like when people come in to request a permit application for some type of closure, based on the type of event it is, we would like to be able to suggest to them, okay, that event goes here. It's not wherever you want to have it. It needs to be in specific locations. So these devices could be more easily deployed to those locations, and it would be streamlined for them to know that, hey, this is where you need to hold your event. That's kind of where we're headed with some of this. But we did a lot of reaching out to the people that OUPD, for example, has a lot of different types of barriers than the city has. We reached out to some of their vendors and got some information from them. We know that concrete barriers could still be part of the system, but they don't replace anything that's out there now. So, and that was true with the bollards as well.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of what OUPD does.
Big gates.
Well, they put the giant concrete barriers out all over Lindsay Street and Jenkins, and they leave them out all season long, and they look terrible, and they kill all the grass. And I am certain that they are violating ADA accessibility rules. When I look at some of their concrete things they put up, I'm like, they're blocking the whole sidewalk. There is no way somebody in a wheelchair can fit in between that. No way.
48-inch minimum.
And I'm like, and so yeah, I've just been like, oh, you come on, step up and
They're working on
do a better job of
permanent
this.
And we are not proposing that. Let's just
Yeah.
dispel that right now.
Can you go back to the last slide? I wanna just really kind of key on one of these items real quick, and that's the consideration of event-friendly zones. So let's say we establish some areas that, you know, what events can we support? What events can't we support as a city staff with our current resources? You know, I think we've been in discussion as a group that establishing some of these zones and considering long-term solutions would really be beneficial. Like David said, you wanna come to the city and host X type of event or X type of parade. These are some areas that we would like you to do that in or like to see that in. If we establish those areas in the future, then we can start to do things with our maintenance projects and our design projects of incorporating traffic rated street furniture, barrier walls that, you know, can work on the sidewalks and that the modular system can tie into, and we'll go into, we'll go to the next one here.
Well, I was just gonna say, I had that in my notes, but I wasn't turned to that page, so.
So this is what, an example of what we're talking about, and as luck would have it, this is from the South by Southwest Music Festival. So these are the Meridian Rapid Defense. Major Barber invited me out to an event they had a few weeks ago, and I got to see these in person and kind of the setup. So mobile capability, they can be expanded beyond the roadway. Remember, our bollards were just planned for the roadway. As we learned on New Year's, that people can find access off roadway as well. So they can be expanded beyond the roadway, ADA accessible. So you'll see there the yellow pads in between each of those. So all of those items are connected, and they're about 700 pounds apiece.
That was my biggest kind of advocacy for this for the bollards is our current setup. We got the road closed signs and they block the whole street. So even you've got this mass of people coming out of the stadium coming to Campus Corner, and they're being funneled to the tiny sidewalks next to Louis and Starbucks, and it blocks the whole street and doesn't look very good either. But that would
Better
that would address the issue that I have with our current way. And then like on White and Buchanan, sometimes we use like a school bus to block the street, and then it's blocking the sidewalk too.
So they can be configured in a very ADA accessible format. Rapid deployment, and I say they blend well with the current staff operation. So this is something that we could buy the product, and all it takes is this little specialized dolly that connects to the front of those, and bam, we're in business.
So what, you just basically drive over them and it wedges up underneath?
Yeah, so they're designed, if you hit them, it wedges. If you try and slowly hit it, it digs itself in. If you hit it at a high rate of speed, it immobilizes.
These are very similar to more gap potential than what we have now, where they're more portable, but much more robust.
So we can incorporate that into the current staff that we have, right? One thing that we think about with these, maintenance wise, right, probably some paint touch up every once in a while, I'm sure, and then replacement throughout periods of time. But then compare that to a long-term fixed asset in the roadway that cannot be utilized anywhere else.
Or fixing the roadway.
Yes. It can be incorporated with other systems as well. So we have some pre-existing concrete barricades that we've started to use for a couple of things. And I think that if we're gonna continue that operation, we need to look at replacing with some newer concrete barricades than what we have today. But this can be incorporated in along with your everyday streetscape elements. If you have traffic rated streetscape, along the side, say a large planter or whatever, you can tie these items to those and connect the system together. Another item, they are direct purchase or rental option. So speaking with them, there is a rental option that, you know, maybe we consider running a test with them. I don't know what their schedule looks like for that, but that could be an option. Down at the bottom is one of their gates that incorporates into this system as well, going back to the ingress egress points. To say we need to be able to go down every single road for an event is not necessary if we plan well ahead and we can create adequate ingress and egress points through something like this, or next slide,
Like that could
the
be
drop
on
gate that OU has.
Aspen White, facing north, because there's not, massive people walking that way.
So we talked with OU about these, and these are just rock solid, rock solid barricades. Very low maintenance, ease of operation. How many do they have on solar again? Just one right now, but they're
One that they used a couple weeks ago, and there have been several others.
can be retrofit for solar, or run by a small generator. And the same thing, this is a modular system that can be custom fit, so we can incorporate it with our concrete barricades. If we can get some of these the Meridian Rapid Defense System, it could be incorporated with that. So there's a lot of options if we can look at a modular system. And start thinking long-term about areas where we wanna do this and the type of equipment that we wanna incorporate.
I have to run, but I personally really like the one you showed just before that. 'Cause they're kind of like bollards, they're slender, tall, people can walk through them, but then they achieve the protection that we're looking for. Would you still have to put like a bus and K-rails and water barriers behind all that still, or would those be sufficient?
So no, so they are designed to immobilize traffic.
Okay.
So yes, what
that's
you
all
wanna
you
do
have.
is provide a buffer,
Right.
right? So you wouldn't want to have a major population area 10 foot behind it.
Sure, right.
Maybe it's 50 feet,
Right,
depending on the speed of the road or the,
That makes sense.
Now, we would still have, like, example, if you're coming into Campus Corner from the north on Asp, you'd still probably have a road closed sign ahead so that people don't keep driving down here.
Gotcha.
We're telling you now.
Right.
So you'd still have to have some sort of advanced warning to stop people from getting to that point, and now you got a turnaround
It would just
problem.
look less like a war zone.
But once you may have a type 3 barricade back there or a large road sign, and then you'd come down to this and you wouldn't have the big type 3, 5 foot tall barricade sitting there in front of you and going, wow, that's just
Looks-
fancy.
It's the best we can do, yeah.
And I never felt like they could stop a car either.
And they
The road
don't.
closed
Right.
things.
we will always have it's a layered system. We will
Yeah.
always have type 3 barricades and traffic signage to direct the travel around these closures.
Thank you very much for you guys putting this together.
Yes, sir.
Again, the main goal too is to make sure that basically when Campus Corner is closed down for a game day event or whatever, that people can freely flow through the street and the sidewalks. Because the sidewalks are so narrow, especially like on White Street and Buchanan and even Asp, but it's just hard, I think, when you're trying to funnel that many people to the sides like that. So stop all the cars from getting in there, but in that modular one, that would allow for, if Logie's was caught on fire during a game day, fire truck would be able to enter in through there or come in through the other
Those are
side.
more like when the road is closed, you would have to have a combination of those, like the gates, still to provide the access. Very similar to what we do today with the MVBs, but the MVBs are more portable, is why we have to man those, right? So you have to move them over.
So maybe one of the entrances would have or
It's a
that
combination
thing
of
there,
efforts like
okay.
that, right? And a little bit dynamic, a little bit changing. Obviously, we have 3 teams work together on all these events to make anything possible. We also change those from time to time, obviously, for some security purposes. And to your point, the pedestrian stuff, I think we'll see a lot of changes this year, for football in particular, that'll help with some of that. But it also gives, like on the one on the bottom there, or the next slide, it helps those delineations, of, hey, like, this is no longer a closed road, you need to be on the sidewalks. So like you see on Boyd now, like, Boyd's wide open, but when you get to the end of it, you need to be out of the road because it's now an open road.
Yeah.
So it helps that whole, like, that cognitive process as well for people as they move about, so. And to Joe's point earlier, our intent is that group, unless you want to give us a completely different direction, is to basically build out that menu, right? So when somebody comes and says, hey, we want to do a 5K in the city, what happens now is they come in and say, we want to do it here, we want to do it there, we want to do it everywhere else, and it spends a tremendous amount of resources and time and energy and cost assessments and everything to figure out what does that look like in that location, and that's okay occasionally, but we know that most people don't really care where they have it. And we can give them 4 or 5 pre-designated places that we know, and then that allows their team, especially within Public Works, as they build out those future road improvement project stuff to really start incorporating that into the neighborhood. That those are identified, and that comes into a cost to benefit. Obviously, it's a huge savings for staff, and it makes it much easier for the participants. It's much less frustration for them because they already know what it is. If it's a parade, here's your option. If it's a 5K, here's your option. If it's a music festival, I mean, so it makes it a lot better for everybody involved.
Okay.
So hopefully this summer we plan on having some of that progress for you all.
Yeah, I like the idea of having a map of areas that you can have certain types of events. I was also thinking about smaller stuff or potentially larger stuff, like if somebody came through and they wanted to film and they wanted a street closure, or you think neighborhood parties, but those usually I feel like nobody's trying to crash into those, and you just use like the gate barriers.
We do those almost every weekend.
Yeah. So I guess, yeah, talk to Campus Corner about these, and then maybe there's other ways to address the car club motorcycle element.
I
But-
thought Wanzik being back on the bike was very effective last fall, just when he came out. Other than the bike not being able to start after he stopped.
But I would say too, some of the discussion we had with them, they did like the idea of having maybe that section closed on the weekends, which would open up the opportunity for weekend street markets, you know, or other things they could be doing with a closed street, so.
And I think if there was a real interest, that would be a 50 weekends out of the year type of
Or
situation.
maybe it's a season when the weather's good.
But you know, I mean, if we wanted to look at some, there are probably some other alternatives. That's where we start looking at more street furniture. And, you know, at a certain point, you're kind of like, does that just become a pedestrian mall? I don't know the answer to that.
I'll tell you, one person on that association would love it, so.
It's the best
But,
candidate
you know,
in
so
all of Norman. I would
those are
say.
things that as this, but this at least gives us a framework, it gives us a footprint, and it gives us a start that we then continue to work on interdepartmentally to make sure that we have solutions that meet the citizens' needs, our work needs, and our emergency services needs, and crowd control and all the other items that go along with that.
I would, I've got two things here. Number one, I would, from my stance, I believe that part of that is a policy decision on council's part, right? How many events do we support as a city, as a staff? How many of these can we support? Game day, obviously, we have a lot of, you know, that's a very large event that brings in a lot of people into our city. We want to make sure we're taking care of our residents and our visitors and keeping them safe. But the events on Campus Corner are not city events. We're not the ones planning and coordinating those events. We do provide support. So if they're saying they want to shut down ASP every weekend, I would say that maybe there needs to be a discussion at a level well above myself about who is responsible. You know, do they get their own road closures, their own equipment, and just get the approval to do so? Or is it something that we're going to invest in as well? Like, but
I would say the merchants are different than the property owners, and there have been discussions, there's not many property owners, but one was interested in potentially seeing that part come into Center City and the Center City TIF, which would pay for things. But, you know, that's far down the road, but
I think we definitely have to think long-term.
yeah.
The other item that I wanted to bring up is we have funding in this project to do the construction of the bollards. And we wanted to try and get some clarification tonight on whether or not you supported us pursuing some of these modular elements and working towards, that's the short term, I think, is getting some of these modular elements in place, starting to purchase some of these and incorporate them into the events that we're involved with, and then start looking at the future and what it looks like. So we wanted to see if we had that support to start looking that direction.
I would say yes. I was curious about the rental option and thinking about football season coming up this year. could you rent for that and test them out? Or,
So I
We're looking at all the options.
okay,
I think we would have to look at it. We would have to know all of the dates. They did say, you know, they've only got a certain amount of rental capacity. So looking out, we're 4 months out from football season, right? 4.5 months out. We may be able to rent for one. I don't know if we could rent for every home game and what the details of those are, but we
And
can
what is-
certainly.
the timeline on purchasing, is there like a, you know, with all the shortages or backlogs, if you will?
Don't know the answer and,
That's part of the reason why we want to, if we want to move this direction,
Yeah.
sooner is better than later.
Okay,
given the current state of things, I'm sure whatever we tell you today could change tomorrow, so,
oh, yeah, okay, well, yeah, I would say definitely look into them. I think they do provide the solutions we were looking for pedestrian traffic, help with flow. And yeah, maybe talk to the Campus Corner Merchants Association a little bit more too.
I would, I like the ones that are on that picture. I'd love to see those in operation by football season if possible. So and I think it's fitting what I'm thinking, by, again, stopping traffic from going through, but also allowing the free flow of people in wheelchairs and et cetera to go through, as well. So, and nicer. If we buy them, we can make them crimson and cream or something, I don't know, colored. But yeah, I'm for that. I'm in favor of, yeah, do whatever you guys need to do to go with this system. I think that's pretty good.
Right. You guys have anything else to offer?
Thank you.
thank you guys.
All right, thank you all. That's it.